you also mentioned in your notes that there was one library deal you got with a great library that wasn't through Taxi Forward, but everything you had learned through Taxi gave you the confidence and the business skills and the vernacular to reach out to them. So that's something that we hear all the time from people. So it's not just make a submission, get a forward, get a deal. There's so much more, so many more branches to the tree that is Taxi, and I'm glad that you figured that out and that you learned those skills and did it. Let's talk about.
Some of my most lucrative libraries and where I get most of my placements are through libraries that I did reach out to myself. But I could only imagine what would have happened if I had reached out to those libraries before my music was up to par. It would have been crickets for sure.
I'm
And
so glad you mentioned that.
the only way I would have gotten my music up to par is by listening to the screeners, making the changes, starting listening to other music that's been forwarded, listening to other library music was huge. Once I got accepted into my first library, then you have a plethora of music to listen to. And it does not have words. They're all instrumental cues. So if you find a library that has a public page, you could listen to instrumental cues that have been signed without having to listen. When you click on the brief, usually in the Taxi listing, it's a popular song and it has words, right?
Right. We
Even
say they need something without lyrics.
even if it's a listing for an instrumental cue, you'll still most of the time uh, there's a link to a track that has a melody sung by a singer, and I was always confused by that because I didn't know what instrument would be right to replicate the singer melody, and I struggled with that a lot. But as soon as I got into my first library and I was able to listen to albums and albums of pop cues, I can now hone in. Okay, well, that's the instrument that's playing the melody on that one. Okay, I could also do this for the melody. And that it was a really great eye opener to be able to listen to other cues.
And oftentimes the melody that's played by an instrument that would replace what a vocalist would do, it's a lot. I call it melody light. It's not maybe as full of a melody, not as complex, because then that becomes distracting. It almost sounds like 101 strings, like elevator music when you do that, 101 strings doing Yesterday by the Beatles. So I'm really glad. And obviously, the reason that we can't link to the library's music is then uh, there are a lot of people who aren't members that see our emails, and they can do some stuff that's maybe not all that professional. One of those things is reaching out to libraries when they're not ready, which you mentioned a minute ago. And I want to go back to that point because there are some people teaching courses out there that include, take my course for three, four, $500, and I'll give you an email list of the 300 library owners or managers' email addresses. And then they reach out to these people thinking, I've got the shiz. And what they're doing is closing doors for the future because they weren't ready to submit. Even though you have a key to the door, doesn't mean that you've got what they need, want, or would even respect when you get through the door. So I'm really glad that you brought that up. I recommend to people don't make that move until you've been accepted into several libraries and you have working relationships with them and you know the drill and you're ready. Then you can email a library on your own and say, I'm in 5 other libraries. I've had placements on these 4 networks. Would you like to listen to a couple of my tracks? And they almost always will say yes to that.
You have to be certain that your music is up to par, because if it's not, you're going to embarrass yourself and close that door forever. When I had reached out to one of my library connections, the very next day, I had noticed 150 plays on my SoundCloud. This library owner had gone and listened to almost everything that I had done in the past 6 months. and that was an eye opener. They wanted to listen to everything that I do to make sure that I was a good fit for that library. And that's happened on a couple of different occasions. They do listen to a lot of what you send them if they want
If they,
if
if
they
the,
want to sign you as a composer, they want to make sure that it's not just one or two flukes that you were able to do.
right.
They want to make sure that you can consistently produce this high quality music.
And they won't keep listening if the first one doesn't impress them. If the first one's not at least an 8 out of 10 to give them some hope that they'll find gems, they won't keep listening. So that's what I'm talking about. People, they might get the key to the door, but that's as far as they're going to get, because the first thing, if a library owner hears something that's clearly not up to par, or is evidence that the composer really doesn't understand what library music is, you might have 1,000 cues up there, 1,000 pieces of music, and they're never going to make it to number two because number one will shut them down.
And please don't get me wrong, I did not give them a link to 150 cues. I gave them a, a group of 5 that I thought were my strongest, and then on their own, they went to the main page and took it upon themselves to listen to everything that I had on there.
Let's talk about, well, you mentioned that you learned the developmental arc formula, which uh, people still ask me, even though we've done taxi TVs that were completely and utterly just about the developmental arc. Explain what a developmental arc is to your fellow members who may not know.
Well, it's taking the listener on a musical journey or telling a story with your music, which I never understood until I did.
Mhm.
So the two things I did that were tremendously important, and this was really the turning point for me, was discovering that the forwards blog was not the forwards section of the taxi forum. The forwards blog is a completely separate area where you can go and see and listen to most of, if not all of the tracks that were forwarded to the listings each day. So
From your
even
fellow members, yeah.
if your music didn't get forwarded and you want to hear the ones that were forwarded to kind of see the difference between the ones that were successful and yours, to see where you fell short, the forwards blog is a no-brainer, because I would go and listen to everything. I would take a little notebook and I would write down exactly what was happening.
Smart.
Okay, 0 to 10 seconds, a little drum and melody. 10 seconds in, a big bombastic crash, and the whole cue just opens up. Maybe at 25 seconds, the drums go out and it's just the bass and melody. At 38 seconds, maybe there's a little brick. So I would write down everything that I heard. And I did this for, there were 2 people, and I already mentioned them once during this video already, but the 2 people that were like getting every single forward for the pop cues were Chris Mosier and Greg Carrozza. So I remember sitting down and just listening to their music all day long and writing down everything that I heard. They don't know that I did this with their music. So thank you, Greg, and thank you, Chris. But that was a really good turning point for me. And I also did that, like I said before, with the libraries. Once I was in the libraries, I was listening to everything on the pop album, or everything on the EDM album. And the other thing that was hugely important for the developmental arc was hearing Matt Vanderbo's breakdown of his cue when it was, I think it was like the 2021 Road Rally. I watched it on YouTube because on the taxi page there's a little thing in red that says "Watch the 2021 Road Rally." I was like, okay, well, let me do that. And then he just talked about it in such a way that I was zoned in. And it's like he was so detailed. He said, I always start off with a little fill, boom, boom, and then right into my melody, like everything that the cue is, because it's like, think of it as a dating profile, you know? You want to give them the goods right away. You don't want to make them wait 45 seconds through a long show them who you are right away. Like, you want that first profile picture on your dating profile to be your best one. So tell them what it's going to be. And then about 30 seconds in, you have an edit point or a stop down. And then it'll go into what I like to call an A minus. So that first section was an A and then an A minus. So usually I'll take the drums out, or I'll take something out, and it'll be like a minimal version of the A section. And then in the maybe 45 seconds to a minute in, you need to change something. Are you going to change the chord progression? Usually I change the chord progression. You don't need to change the chord progression. You can change something else. You can change the melody. You can change the drum pattern. Maybe the drums are different. Usually it's either the harmonic elements or the melodic elements that change during that B section.
Yeah, some people will take the chord progression from the A section and just reverse it for the B, kind of treating it like a bridge in a regular song.
Yeah, just think of it as you're giving the music editor or music supervisor another choice. If they didn't like the chord progression or melody in their A section, the B section will have the same exact production, same exact instrumentation, but just one thing is different. Because if they didn't like the melody in the A and they do like the melody in the B, they're going to choose the B for their placement. Okay, so you're just giving them another option. And then the big piece of the developmental arc, and if you forget this, you're always going to get dinged for it, is the breakdown. Everything goes away and it's just a very sparse, and then throughout your breakdown it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and it builds up and it builds up, and then your final section is what I like to call an A plus. It's your original A section, but you got to add something. Maybe there's like a shaker now, or maybe there's like clapping, something to make it distinguishable from your A. Because remember, you're only doing this to give the editor of the show that it's going to be in choices. They already have the A section. They don't need another A section that's exactly the same. That does nothing for them. Give them the A, but put something else in, because that something else in makes it different from the first one. And that something else could make that editor say, oh, we want that. We like the shaker. We didn't really like it without the shaker when we first heard it, but we like it with the shaker. We're going to choose that to go in the show.
Because the part with the shaker works better in the scene. It's not even so much a matter of they like it or they don't. They like it in the context of what they need it for. And
Yep.
you know, something that you mentioned 20 minutes ago that I'm sure was very, very valuable in this process of you understanding how the pieces of a cue work for editors is you watched a lot of TV. I wrote an article years ago, or maybe it was a marketing piece, everything you need to know is staring you in the face every night. Most of us watch TV after work at night. All you have to do is watch, and you'll quickly realize it's extremely rare that a cue is used from beginning to end, which Jeff LaPlante of the olden days would have thought my music's going to play in its entirety, and the TV audience is going to listen to what a great songwriter I am or what a great composer I am, and it's all about me and my music. No, it's about a piece of your music working in 12 seconds of a scene that makes the scene better, and you've figured that out.
Yeah. And then, of course, the last piece to the arc is you need that stinger ending. Super, super important. And really all that is, all that can be, it could be something like bum, 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 or really all you need is ending hit and a chord that should end on the tonic. So if you understand music theory, if you're playing in the key of C, that ending chord should be a C chord. Boom. They need that. So no matter what they use from the cue beforehand, they're going to take that stinger, drag it over, because they need an ending for their television scene.
Right.
Super
They're
important.
coming out of that beat. They call it like Little sections within a scene are called beats. So, like somebody is walking out of the room and shutting the door because they're ticked off at their spouse or their kids have just upset them. They're like, I'm out of here. Boom. And your music has to time, the editor will slide your music to hit with the door slam. And they want something big, an exclamation point, I always say. So you either need a period. If it's like a classical piano piece, it needs a period. And if it's a bigger, more bombastic or a rock piece, anything that's just got more juice to it, then it should be an exclamation point. You know, funny thing, I've never mentioned this in public before, but you just reminded me something I would like our members to pay more attention to. We recently did a taxi compilation CD of solo piano stuff, and we got in so much really good stuff. There were a couple pieces that I personally felt that we shouldn't put on that CD or not CD compilation. See how old I am, because even though the piece was great, when it got to the buttoned ending or the sting, they lifted their foot.
I still buy CDs, Michael.
Gay, I feel better about myself. Thanks, Jeff. Thanks for sharing that. Um, it would They would lift off the sustain pedal while the note was ringing out. So you'd get 3 seconds of beautiful ring, and then they'd lift off the pedal, probably go make a cup of coffee, and you still have the ring out, but it's not the same ring out. And it just totally kills the usefulness of that ring out. Because sometimes that last note that lands on the tonic and the downbeat, it might be that door slam thing, but then there's a second and a half of crossfade into the next scene or something where you need that ring out to carry you through. So pay attention, folks. If you're doing anything, like, don't put your hand on guitar strings and mute them. Let the chord ring until you can't hear it in headphones anymore. Same thing with piano or a synth, anything. Reverb tails, let them go the full distance to the point where not even a bat could hear them, and then you hit stop.
Yeah, a lot of those new piano libraries, they're so sensitive and you can hear like mechanical noises that have been programmed into the sound. So you have to be really, really careful with those. Like they sound cool until you notice that sound that really shouldn't be in there. And once you hear it, you can't unhear it. It's like a foofy, like, oh, I can't stand it.
Well, one last thing that I would like to talk about is you mentioned that you now know how to find modern sounds. That is a problem that prevents people from getting forwarded. Sometimes we hear pieces that are really well composed. They have a developmental arc. The taxi member gets everything right. And there's that one synth sound that you just sit there and go, ah, why would you choose that? You couldn't hear that that sounds like 1998, or that it's just, even if it's not dated sounding, it's just completely wrong for the piece. Would you Can you explain your methodology for finding modern sounds, and do you like file them away and organize them so you can access them more quickly when you're working on future pieces?
What's interesting, I did not know where these sounds were. I thought they were in this keyboard that I spent $3,000 for. It's a
Wow.
Core Kronos, and I thought, well, I have the best keyboard in on the market right now. The best modern sounds that these taxi screeners must be in there. Um, they weren't. So where are these sounds? They're on the internet. They're on the internet. You can buy virtual instruments. One of the best ones I have is Omnisphere. I don't think there's a composer today that doesn't have Omnisphere, and
Right.
there's many different expansions from many different companies. Another huge one is, if you have the money for it, is the Contact Complete from Native Instruments. So many good sounds. Like you can get the exact drum sounds that Drake uses on Contact. It's called 40 zone keys and 40 zone drums. Those are Drake's sounds. That's his producer that made that instrument. um, Splice.com is where every major producer is going to find sounds. And I don't mean loops, I'm talking about one shot kicks. Like if you want a kick that has been perfectly produced, if you want to find the snare that Charlie Puth used, that's on Splice. All of the top producers are using Splice sound. So what I do is I go to Splice, I load the sounds that I like onto my little pad, and I'll make the beat using the sounds from Splice. Now, a step further, if I like let's say it's a synth pad loop, I can't take the whole loop, right? Because I don't want my cue to sound like somebody else who took the same loop. And
or even have copyright issues,
right,
or yeah, there are about 5 different ways that can go badly.
but if I like the sound of the pad, I'll take the pad, I'll load it into a program called Serato Sample. I'll sample one little chord from the loop, and I'll put it on here. Now, I have, oh, I could pitch it around. So now I have my A minor, I have my G, I have my F, I maybe have my E minor. So I'll create my own chord progression using the amazing sounds that are on Splice. I'll do it with 808s from my hip hop stuff. If you find a crazy sounding 808, that's just one note.
Yeah.
That's just one note. That's all you need, is to find one that's been produced the way you like it. Load it in the Serato, put it on your pads. Now you have, if you pitch it according to what you want, you can have let's stick with the key of C. I can have my C, my A, my F, and my G. Maybe I'll have my E way down here, and I'll go boom, 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 boom. So it is my music. I'm just using the sounds that I found on Splice. So if that makes sense.
Yeah, and it'll make my son-in-law very happy because he's a programmer at Splice. And I want to mention Rob Shirelli. I don't know if you know who he is, but he's a very, very dear friend of mine, probably my closest friend. Is a mixer producer that's worked with he's got 5 Grammys, countless gold and platinum records. I'm literally looking at his chimney over the top of my laptop as I'm talking to you. He and I and our families go to 4th of July fireworks every year together. And for 5 years running, I kept saying, I love that percussive sound of the really big boomers. So about 3, 4 years ago, he actually grabbed one with his phone, took it home, trimmed the front, trimmed the back, added some bottom end to it, compressed it, and made a kick drum sound that anybody in the world would love to have. I've
There
got
you
it on
go.
my laptop.
And that is what all of the top producers are doing. So the sounds that you're looking for are not on these $1,000 workstations. They're all on the internet. You can get a subscription to Splice for like $10 a month or something ridiculous like that. But that's what every top producer, I think maybe something like 30 of the songs on the Billboard charts for pop music were all from the Oliver drum collection. So that guy Oliver, whoever he is, he's like buying mansions with his Splice.
Go, Ollie.
Yeah, find those drums because everyone's using those.
Well, I've got to say, this has been a tremendously informative interview. I'm so grateful that you would take time on a Saturday to do this and help educate your fellow members and tell your story. And I'm just so happy for you that you didn't walk away forever. You know, you had a couple of rough early experiences. Frankly, you hung in longer than I would have, or than most people would have. And you must be a little bit of a glutton for punishment because it took you 4 years to go, all right, I give up. But then you came back and you figured it out.
I
And
just always knew I had it in me, man. And that's not just the people telling me that I had talent. Like I really believed in myself, and I knew I wasn't done.
well, I'm so happy that you understood that about yourself, and congratulations on your blooming success. And I'm sure that you'll reach the 500 signed cues by the end of the year. I can tell by your work ethic and your personality that you'll accomplish that goal. And man, if there's any way you can make it to the road rally, think about it, because honestly, I would love to put you on a panel with Vanderbo and a couple other guys. I don't want to disclose. I'm thinking about doing a panel like I've never done before. I'm going to talk about it. That would be a combination of a library owner or two or three members, and probably a music supervisor or an editor, all in the same panel. And rather than me having questions that I wrote, have the audience submit questions in advance. So every question they're asked, you could say, okay, I've got a question for Jeff LaPlante, and I would obviously direct the question to you so that they can hear this sort of stuff. So I'm telling you, I haven't heard about a case of COVID amongst any friends or acquaintances of mine in so long. And yeah, just think about it and let me know in the next couple of weeks, as I'm starting to really finalize my plans for the rally.
Yeah,
Um,
I will. Michael, I'm just honored that you asked me to do this. I didn't even know that you knew who I was. Like I'm just the guy who's making music. And when you called me, I was like, oh my God, like why me? Am I worthy of this?
you are. You are. That's exactly why I called. Actually, I mentioned it in the A&R department, and our head screener actually said, "Oh, Jeff LaPlante, man, that guy's got it down. That guy gets forwarded all the time. He's really, really good." So you're not only on my radar, you're on everybody's radar, and we revel and delight in the success of our members, because we know that you almost have to have an epiphany, like, oh, this is what I need to do to be successful. Well, you've clearly had that epiphany, and you've gone from making most, if not all, of the new member mistakes to becoming somebody that's going to end up retiring with a very healthy retirement income because of the music you're making now at this age. So,
Yes.
congratulations.
One more thing, like all of the critiques, like throughout the years of failing, sure, it got me down. But when I started getting those forwards and hearing what the screeners had to say about my music, it lifted me up so much higher than I was even at the beginning. So it's been a good thing overall. I remember one time I submitted 6 things for one listing, and all 6 got forwarded, and the screener was so nice. Or like, hardly ever do we have 6 forwards for the same listing. You clearly know what you're doing. And I was like, oh my God, that. And I think that's the week that I started reaching out to libraries on my own, because I had the confidence. I was like, yes, somebody realized that I know what I'm doing. Now I'm ready to start, just pitching my music in other avenues as well. And that proved to be, really lucrative for me.
Well, congratulations. I couldn't be happier. Please keep letting us know when you get deals, or especially placements. And just know that you can always say to Deb, can you use, some of the, background stuff that I've sent you on previous ones? Because it's important for other members to be inspired by their fellow members' success. You guys are all using the same company, ostensibly submitting to the same listings, give or take, depending on your genres, and getting heard by many, if not most, or all of the same screeners. So it really comes down to, the variable is the member. And when people figure out what you have figured out, they become successful members. And that's what we live for. So thank you again, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Jeff LaPlante.
Thank you.